What is LMIA?
The LMIA involves going to a separate government department. They issue a labor market impact assessment. You can use it for a work permit.
Why is LMIA fraud so difficult for the government to crack down?
I think some economic data was suggesting that if you are here and you have a job and it's LMIA based, then you're more likely to succeed in Canada.
Does the government cancel the PR status once they know that LMIA fraud had occurred?
CBSA or RCMP or police force will raid and they'll look at the laptop and they'll see all the people that had a fake tie-up with an employer.
Do you think politicians benefit because of these LMIA loopholes?
They are extremely influential in terms of the consultants with respect to re-election campaigns of members of parliament.
If someone buys a fake LMIA, but they work diligently, they pay their taxes, should they still be deported?
The government's going to have absolutely no sympathy for you whatsoever.
Hi, I'm Manish Kapoor tuning in from Canada, and I'm really glad you're here. This is where we sit down with some amazing minds, leaders, creators, and change makers to talk about the things that matter. Every episode is a chance to learn something new, get inspired, or just hear a fresh take. So let's get into it.
Today, we are joined by one of Canada's most respected immigration lawyers, Ravi Jain, founder of Jain Immigration Law. With over 24 years of experience, Ravi is among the small group of certified specialists in immigration law by the Law Society of Ontario. He has been recognized nationally and internationally with honors such as Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal, Lawyer of the Year by Best Lawyers in Canada, and a Top 50 Under 50 award from the Indian High Commissioner. Ravi has also addressed Parliament and the Senate as a subject matter expert and has played a key role in shaping Canada's immigration law landscape. We're thrilled to have him today to talk about LMIA fraud and its impact on Canada's immigration system. So let's get into it. All right, Ravi, thanks for being here and doing this with us. So we'll be discussing a topic which I think a lot of viewers would love to listen to, and they'll absolutely gain a lot of benefit listening to you about this topic. So let's get started. First question, what is LMIA?
Okay. Well, it's a default in terms of the default work permit. So there's many different types of work permits we offer in Canada. They're open work permits. If you're, coming as a dependent on a spouse, maybe the spouse has a work permit or a study permit. There are treaty-based work permits. There are special programs for international experience from a lot of Europeans coming over on working holiday, etc. There are also other categories like reciprocity-based, if the company or organization sends people from Canada abroad, maybe sports or maybe intercompany. There's also the intercompany, where if you've worked for a company for at least a year abroad, you can come. And then when nothing else fits, then we go to the LMIA. So the LMIA involves going to a separate government department.
Okay.
A lot of people around the world will think of it as the Department of Labor, but we call it ESDC, Employment Skills Development Canada, or also known as Service Canada.
Okay.
So you go to a separate government department, they issue a labor market impact assessment.
That's what it stands for.
Exactly. They're assessing the labor market
Okay.
to see if Canadians are available, see if the prevailing wage is met in the particular region, see if there's been 3 sources of advertising. It's a pretty exhaustive process. And then after all that's done, once they issue the LMIA, then you can take that LMIA and you can either use it towards your permanent residence application,
Okay.
or you can use it for a work permit. Now, nowadays, you don't really use it for your permanent residence application because they've removed the points you used to get on the, for your federal point system.
And when did they remove that?
Well, it's not been too long. It's been a few months, but they did it ostensibly to combat fraud.
Okay.
So it was a kind of a hammer approach instead of a scalpel. They said, well, there's so much fraud in the system. We're just removing the points. That'll remove the incentive to game the system. But of course, a lot of innocent people have been affected. A lot of executives. We've got a new prime minister now, and focusing on, I presume, innovation and focusing a bit more on business and what's good for Canada. We're worried about tariffs. And yet here we are with these very prominent people with very specialized skills, executives and managers that, cannot transition anymore to permanent residence because they're lacking the points. So it was a hammer approach that really was a bit of overkill because there are lots of genuine people here as well that need those extra points to get permanent residence. Government doesn't seem to care.
For sure. So who applies for the LMIA? Is it the employer or the applicant?
Well, the employer has to apply. The
Okay.
employer has to pay the government fee. It's not appropriate for the employees to pay the government fee of $1,000. It is an employer-driven application.
I see. And how long would this application take to be approved?
Well, I mean, it's you got a month of advertising typically. Then it takes another couple months to approve. There's lots of issues with it right now because there was a policy of the government of Canada that if you're waiting for the LMIA and your work permit's about to expire, you're here on a work permit, you might apply to extend the work permit just before the guide says 30 days, but the law says you can do it even a few days before. It's no issue. So we wait right until the last minute. We apply for the extension because we don't want immigration to get the application for the work permit extension too early, open it, see no LMI, and refuse it. So we wait to the very last minute. We apply for the extension, and then we indicate that the LMIA is in process.
Okay.
Again, the government used to hold those applications, but they're increasingly not holding them really too long at all. So they open it up, they see no LMIA, and they can just refuse it. So you really so we're advising our employer clients to really get ahead of the game.
Okay.
Apply much earlier than you would expect, get that LMIA in process, approved, and then we have it in hand when we apply for the work permit extension.
What kind of employers normally apply for LMIA? What kind of
Well,
industries?
I mean, there's lots of employers we use it for. I mean, there's across all kinds of industries, right?
Okay.
I mean, there are times when, I've got a luxury, clothing brand. I've got, all kinds of, different corporate clients that use it because we don't have the Canadian talent. Like how many luxury brands, fashion brands do we have in this country? Not very many, right? So sometimes you need a specialist to come in. We don't have the skills. We don't have people expert in pricing on luxury goods necessarily, or techniques of manufacturing or whatever. So we need a high level sort of people coming in, and we use it for that. Again, when no other categories apply. There are also situations when it's a remote area. There's they can't find basic skills in terms of whether it's a restaurant worker or what have you. So there are times we might use it in that situation, and Canadians need the service. They need their gas pumped, or they need to go to a restaurant and have a meal and have staff. So there's all kinds of scenarios we use it in. So it's there's a lot of political talk about getting rid of it. Both on the left and the right. So the leader of the Conservative Party is saying get rid of it, and then you have the leader of the NDP out in British Columbia saying to get rid of it, the premier. So it's really odd. And then you have, Prime Minister Carney, who's in the middle saying, well, look, the number one issue employers come to me with is tariffs. The number two issue is foreign workers. We need, they're saying we need foreign workers. So there's a lot of economic discussion where, economists may say, if you bring in cheap foreign workers, then it relieves the responsibility of the companies to innovate. Right? And they're happy to have cheap labor. I have not seen that in my career in terms of the genuine employers I work with. I mean, they genuinely need someone, and they're not going to pay my fee and advertise for a month and pay the government $1,000 if they're so readily able to find a Canadian. So I don't really see that issue of like, the employer is just so unwilling to innovate and they're being lazy and they just want cheap labor. I don't really see that argument, holding any water in reality in my practice.
Okay.
So I kind of discount that, but that seems to be what the economists are very concerned about. And I think the Prime Minister recognizes that, if these CEOs and others are coming to me with this issue, it's a real issue. It's not just about trying to save a few bucks off the bottom line. These are critical workers they need to have successful, competitive companies in Canada.
Okay. So LMIA, is it supposed to somehow save the Canadian workers, and is it actually doing that?
That is the idea.
Okay.
How?
Well,
because you need certain certain workers to be like, for instance, to go back to my earlier example, this company I represent, they have manufacturing in Canada. Normally manufacturing's in China. So if this company can't succeed, all of a sudden, a lot of Canadian workers may be out of a job, right? So that is the ideal scenario, right? You've got a company that employs Canadians, and they need these foreigners because they have specific skills or what have you, right?
Yeah.
And the owner him or herself may have their company at risk, right? If it's a small business in a sort of more rural area or northern area, then they may need workers. Or Alberta, there's lots of areas in Alberta that need people. So
they could have like 5 or 6 workers, out of which 1 or 2 they might need.
It could be, or it could be the owner and the spouse are working, and along with one other person, they need a foreign worker because it's a remote area. So those kinds of situations exist. Of course, the main, if you really want to analyze it, I think 70-80% are agricultural workers, right? But that's not really what we're talking about. And this is why I find it disingenuous when politicians say, "Oh, we should get rid of it."
Yeah.
Because it's unrealistic. Canadians are not going to pick strawberries and do fish farming, whatever they're doing. There's an awful lot of workers that come in that are doing jobs Canadians just will refuse to do,
like hard labor.
Right. So you can raise, and this is what they say. The owners of the farm say, "Look, we raise it way beyond minimum wage, way beyond prevailing wage, and we just can't attract anyone for these positions." So it's clear. To me, Canadians obviously want to be able to have fruit, and we have a lot of agricultural land in this country, so we need to bring in people for that. So then if you remove the 70-80%, we're really talking 20-30%, and are they really a problem? It's less than 1% of the workforce, and yet everyone's getting exercised over it. So I don't think we need to kill it. I think the real issue needs to be focusing on the fraud.
Okay.
Right?
So now we'll talk about LMIA fraud, right? Can you give me some examples or cases that you've seen which involve LMIA fraud?
Well, yes. They're being sold, right, for $60,000-$70,000, and the reason was because they would get points, right? 50 points if you had an LMIA towards your express entry application for permanent residence.
Who is selling them?
Well, these are. I think that the problem is that, if it was just lawyers practicing law, because that's the way it is in the United States and Germany, only a lawyer can practice law. In Commonwealth countries, we've been experimenting with immigration consultants. So that's Australia, the United Kingdom, Canada. We've all been experimenting with immigration consultants.
Yeah.
I'm not saying every immigration consultant is doing fraudulent activities. I'm certainly not saying that. There are some that strive to be diligent. But I do think that, for me, it comes down to public protection. And the argument that they make is, well, this is, a lawyer being self-interested. But, we've always had enough business. And it's not at all the case that, I'm particularly, in my particular situation, I'm worried about a lack of, consultations or revenue or what have you. I've always been busy. I've never had an issue in that regard.
Right.
It's also not the case that I'm a lobbyist for lawyers. As you know, when we act on behalf of the Canadian Bar Association, or in our case, I also have the Canadian Immigration Lawyers Association that I founded with some other prominent immigration lawyers. I led that organization, and I led the Canadian Bar Association immigration section, both national organizations.
Yeah.
Both didn't pay me. In both situations, I volunteered many hours per week, sometimes 20 or more hours a week of my time over the course of 10 years. We didn't just talk about consultants. Obviously, we talked about all kinds of policy changes we thought would be in the interests of Canada and the interests of, of Canadians. So this is just one issue. So when people say, "Oh, well, this is a lawyer being self-interested and he's a lobbyist for a lawyer," it totally misunderstands the nature of our profession and how we give back by volunteering and how we are trying to advocate for the best interests of the nation. And it's not about a lobbyist group for lawyers, right? So first of all, that has to be said. Secondly, when you look at what we're trying to say that a lawyer has gone through typically 4 years of a bachelor's, typically 3 years of law school, Then they have to do the articling year, right? Traditionally, which is like a whole year.
Yeah.
Then they have to do the bar admissions course, which was several months back when I did it.
Yeah.
I also have a master's of law, from the University of Michigan,
Yeah.
which is a top 10 school in the world. So, I mean, this is a lot of effort to get in to law school in Canada, unlike other countries and the United States, for instance. And it could be a 10-year odyssey. So is someone who's gone through all of that education, invested all of that money, going to be so easily convinced to make a few $1,000s by gaming the system and committing fraud?
They have a lot to lose.
They have a lot to lose.
Yeah.
And so so the public is best protected when they can only use a lawyer because the lawyer has a lot to lose. Now, what I say is a lawyer's got to sign off. So now, again, in your industry, you have to be really worried about it being an unsuspecting dupe. So that means that if someone comes to you and it's a big mortgage transaction or something, you have to guard against that. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Because lots of money is involved, and the law side will come after you and say, well, it's not good enough to say, sorry, I didn't realize. You have to be on guard because you're not allowed to be an unwilling dupe. That's the extent to which the law society has those expectations in your field. So in our field, what I'm saying is that you can work with immigration consultants. Immigration consultants would be able to, maybe they are networked in different ethnic communities. Maybe they're good at bringing in business. That's fine. But then ultimately the lawyer has to sign off and can't be an unwilling dupe. So you can't have a situation where immigration consulting firms are employing lawyers, right? Because the lawyer doesn't control their salary. They don't control, and they're vulnerable.
Right.
So really it should be a situation where the lawyers control the firms, and the consultants are partnering with the lawyers. They're able to come into the firm. They're able to bring in clients. They're able to introduce things. But the lawyer has to meet with the client. The lawyer has to sign off. That's the best way to protect against all this fraud that we're dealing with and all this garbage in terms of selling LMIAs or advising people.
It's
to
mostly
lie.
these consultants who are selling these LMIAs.
Well, that's my experience.
Okay.
My experience is that when I see people coming to my office and they're a victim of fraud, they say, well, I say, well, who did you use? What did you go on your own? Did you use someone? Oh, I used a liar. Or I use it, or sometimes they say RCIC or consultant. And if they say liar, I say, let me look it up. I'll type in the name and I look at the Law Society of Ontario, and guess what? They're not there. So then I look at the College of Immigration Consultants, and oftentimes they are there. Okay. Or sometimes they're ghost consultants who are not even registered with the college. And that's what you have a lot of times in India and many other countries, where there's no license or registration whatsoever. And a lot of the consultants will say, well, this is the real problem. You have ghost consultants. And we want them, out of business, because they do see it as competition. Right. And again, we're not seeing it as lawyers. We don't see it as competition. That's the wrong way to look at it. But they do. And they say, we gotta get rid of the ghost consultants. That's the real problem. But that's not actually what I see in my practice. In my practice, I see an awful lot of people who've gone to register consultants. And the consistent theme I see is about either negligence, maybe they didn't realize something, maybe they thought they were, this had worked in the past, or, they just they're not, for instance, non-accompanying dependent. They'll say, well, the person has a spouse here, they've got kids here, and they'll say, well, the spouse is non-accompanying. Okay. And that way they get more points because they're single on the application. And so for years, we've not been doing that because we think that that's dangerous to say you're non-accompanying, and that we go to our law society conferences, et cetera, and the experts, we all discuss these things, and they say, no, that's a bad strategy. Well, the consultants have been doing that. And now all of a sudden the client's getting a procedural fairness letter, and they're at risk of losing their pathway to permanent residence. So that's just one tiny example about how, it might be a slightly, different advice if you're going to a lawyer who's keeping up with the law, as we're expected to do with CPD, et cetera. So I have a bit of, but there's other things too. I've seen where, they say they filed something they didn't. I asked for a copy of the file. I say, it's your obligation to provide it to me. It's a client's property. Here's an authorization. They don't provide it to me. Really? They're not running trust accounts properly. They're not,
they're supposed to have trust accounts.
Well, I'm just saying, like, you look at how a lawyer is supposed to run things,
Yeah.
and you look at the audits the law society does,
Yeah.
and I just don't feel like it's at all the same standard. You look at the sheer volume of complaints, against immigration consultants, and my experience is the vast majority of people, they don't want to complain. They really don't want to complain because they're interested in just getting their benefit, their immigration benefit.
Yeah.
They don't want to create all kinds of problems, right? And so they might, get referred to someone, say, oh, this person helped my nephew or this cousin or whatever. And so then all of a sudden other people go to them, and then, there's disaster strikes, and they just don't know how to handle each case is unique, and there's a problem, and then they may finally get convinced to go and complain with the regulator. So that's the point, though, is like you look at how many have complained with the regulator, and you realize that that's just the tip of the iceberg, because so many just refuse to get involved with any kind of complaints. Then you get the sense of the magnitude of the problem, the magnitude of the harm in terms of negligence, in terms of fraud, et cetera. So it's a real issue in Canada right now, and the people and the public, they may go to an immigration consultant's office, and they may say it's a law firm. And people
really?
in the office may
misrepresent-
refer to them as lawyers. So I often get clients telling me that as well. And you go to the website, and it's not like a lawyer's website. In a lawyer's website, it often has the biography of the lawyer and all the details.
Yeah.
Oftentimes with the consultant's website, we don't know who they are. We don't see the identity of the person. So that's another issue I find. So these are the things I picked up over the years, but yeah, I mean, 25 years of practice, I've seen an awful lot of people who've been victims of consultants, and this is where, I started to realize this is a real problem in our society, and why is this continuing? Why is the government not acting? This college doesn't seem to have any teeth. They don't seem to really do anything, and that's another consistent complaint, is that the college doesn't investigate properly.
Yeah.
They don't get back to people. The complaints last too long, and they get away with it. The consultants that are very, very bad, they don't seem to fear the regulator whatsoever, which is totally different from lawyers, of course.
Yeah. Okay. So is it just the consultants or is it the employers as well who exploit vulnerable immigrants?
Some employers are exploiting vulnerable immigrants. Some of them are.
Examples?
Well, there have been stories of sexual exploitation,
Okay.
where employers dangle that against a vulnerable young woman who really wants to stay in Canada, and there's sexual exploitation. Those are very egregious cases. Sometimes they don't pay the proper wage. They set up a sham payroll, and then they expect the employee to pay back the taxes, and that's sometimes arranged by consultants. So, but yeah, sometimes the employers are more than complicit, and sometimes there's no representative involved necessarily, and the employer is just themselves, exploiting the situation.
This episode is sponsored by Kapoor Law Firm, your trusted real estate law firm serving all of Ontario. Whether you're buying, selling, or refinancing a home or business, their expert team can guide you through every step. And here's a bonus for our listeners. Subscribers to this show can receive a one-time coupon for their upcoming closing. Visit thekapoorpodcast.com to claim yours. So why is LMIA fraud so difficult for the government to crack down on?
I think some economic data was suggesting that if you're here and you have a job and it's LMIA based, then you're more likely to succeed in Canada. But that was before the consultants grew from like 15,000 to like 13,000 now. So there's been an explosion in immigration consultants, and many of them are grandparented in, so they didn't take the Queen's course, which has been running for the last few years, which is a little better than some of the community college courses, which were online and not very rigorous and not very didn't involve a lot of time in terms of the course duration. But again, the Queen's course is online. And again, there's misrepresentation in the sense that, and confusion, because people may say, well, I had professors from the Faculty of Law teaching me at Queen's University. And that's not true. It's not within the Faculty of Law. If you want to get a law degree, you can get a JD and go to Queen's Law School if you can get in. That's not what this is. This is a degree granted by the university writ large, not by the Faculty of Law. It's largely a course where the instructors are consultants, immigration consultants, some lawyers, It's completely online. So, I mean, it's not at all the same rigor of as law school. And so you have the recent grads, and they were pumping in so many graduates from that program and the Montreal program. Those are the two programs that are in existence right now that have replaced all the community colleges that were running the programs. But then there's all these consultants that are grandparented in, like thousands and thousands of them. So, it's a real problem in terms of the landscape of things. In terms of just how many there are and how many we're continuing to pump into the system. Do we really need this many? I don't think we do.
So there, like you said, there are many consultants that keep coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's less than probably 2,000 lawyers doing immigration law.
Yeah.
And there's 13,000 right now immigration consultants. Every year it grows by roughly another 1,000 or so. So there's just too many. And it's really offensive that Queen's University would do this. And you kind of then wonder, what is the motivation? And you realize, well, universities are strapped for cash, right?
Yeah.
So the dean would have thought, okay, this was a good idea. It's going to bring in revenue to the school. I'm assuming that was part of the calculation. I don't know, but I have real concerns about this as a revenue source for the university, and yet, they're getting credentialized, in a way that suggests to the public that they went to Queen's University and it's a rigorous program and all the rest, but it's not law school. I have a problem with that. I have a problem with the college for consultants calling themselves a college. Because, college is normally reserved for College of Physicians, College of Engineering, the true professional bodies for the top professionals in the field.
Yeah.
So by using college, it confuses the public who are aware of the College of Physicians, College of Engineering, whereas with lawyers, we have the Law Society.
Yeah.
They don't know what the Law Society is. So again, they're very good at, I would say gaming the system, but they're very good at making these alliances with universities, calling themselves a college, again, the consultants themselves saying that they have law firms and setting up, websites, and they're all wearing suits and everything else. And the public is totally unsuspecting. And this is a vulnerable segment of the population, those who are here as newcomers, right?
Okay. So you mentioned earlier that around 60,000 is the number that you hear for these consultants to issue fake LMIAs. So is it like a fixed number, or you've heard other numbers for different industries?
No, it's not fixed. I mean, I think that there's a lot of negotiation that goes on.
Okay.
But I've seen upwards, the higher end, 200,000.
Oh, really?
There have been reports and news stories I have from over the years.
That's a lot.
It could be lower. I mean, it's really just, it just depends.
Okay. So is it like hard to get a LMIA for a particular industry, or is it like kind of seamless or same for all the industries?
It depends. I mean, the Department of Labor, so ESDC, they're supposed to look at what the true labor market data is, right? So you look at the industry, you look at the region, if it's marketing, we may graduate a lot of marketers, right?
Yeah.
From our community colleges and universities. So they may say, well, we have a lot of marketers. There's no shortage of marketers. So it's a misnomer or a myth to think that just because you have a willing employer and you have a foreign worker that wants the LMIA, therefore they're going to approve the LMIA. That's not the case at all.
Okay.
They will look at it and see what the labor market data suggests. And now they have direct apply. So when you're advertising, they can see when a Canadian has applied for the job. So, the officers may be less willing to issue the LMIA if they see a lot of Canadians applying, and then the employer is saying, oh, well, I can't find anyone. So that's a good measure that is starting to root out some of the fraud as well. Okay. And of course, removing the points has removed a lot of the incentive. But there are still people who are desperate to stay, and they may need an LMIA to keep working or to get a new job, right? Because their postgraduate work permit's expiring. So, there may be some fraud that's still in the system.
Okay. So if someone's become a victim of LMIA fraud, what steps should they take?
Well, if a consultant has arranged it,
Yeah.
then they have to complain against the college.
Okay.
I'd like to see them go to their member of parliament, to the press.
Yeah.
I'd like to see, as much exposure as possible. And I think there needs to be the maximum pressure possible so people understand how much fraud is going on.
And does the government cancel the PR status once they know that LMIA fraud had occurred? during the process?
Well, they can investigate. So a lot of times people say to me, Ravi, I've got this option. There's a consultant offering me this fake thing. And I say, every once in a while,
Yeah.
CBSA or, RCMP or whoever, the police force will raid, and they'll look at the laptop and they'll see all the people that, that had a fake, tie up with an employer. And then the IRCC and CBSA, they can investigate and ask questions, and they can eventually move to remove the status if it was obtained fraudulently. So you're always looking over your shoulder. You're always at risk. So I always tell people it's not worth it. Yeah. Don't engage in any of these scams. Stay away from these consultants that are offering fake LMIAs, whether they're RCIC licensed or whether they're ghost consultants. Just stay away from the fraudsters.
Okay. And do you think politicians benefit because of these LMIA loopholes in any way?
Well, I've heard from several ministers of immigration who are no longer ministers of immigration that they are extremely influential in terms of the consultants with respect to re-election campaigns of members of parliament.
Okay.
So to me, that does explain an awful lot because, when you see all this fraud and you wonder why the government's not acting, and you say, okay, and you talk to politicians. I talked to even relatively recently, someone said, was an opposition critic and said, oh, well, I talked to my friend, he's an immigration consultant, he advises me on immigration matters. So they're very, very networked and influential in terms of members of parliament. And I think there were a few election campaigns where they were worried about the 905 region.
Yeah. And
they absolutely were. Liberals were worried about it when they were, Trudeau was running for office, and they were really concerned about the 905s. They needed every MP.
What were they concerned about?
They were concerned about the MPs getting reelected.
Okay.
And so, some of those MPs, there was a suggestion that's been made to me is that there were consultants that were influencing and contributing and canvassing, et cetera. And so, obviously, that can have an impact. So that's what I've heard. I can't verify that, but this is just stuff I've heard over the years.
Okay. And obviously, a lot of consultants advertise on WhatsApp, Telegram, Facebook about these, opportunities, LMIA fraud. Isn't it easy for the government to look this up and stop it right there?
One would think if they devoted the resources, they need to devote more resources to combating this fraud. But see, the government's opinion is that, if it's a RCIC, then it's, and this is, I've seen the passing of the buck, where the minister will just say, well, this is an issue with the regulator.
Yeah.
Well, no, but you set up the regulator, remember? And you're appointing someone from your department to be a board member, to supervise, to get reports. They're supposed to report in, about the status. So, I mean, it's a bit disingenuous to me. You allowed this to continue. You allowed them a third kick at the can to be self-regulated.
Who's regulating them?
Well, so there was a couple other attempts at self-regulation of the consultants. So there were other bodies. Okay. This is the third attempt.
Okay.
And so
who were these bodies?
Well, I mean, it was, there was the ICCRC, I think, was the last one. And then there was another one before that.
So they get changed?
Well, yeah, they disband them. And then they say, okay, we're going to let you create a whole new regulator with a whole new set of parameters. And they keep saying that. So what happens is a parliamentary standing committee will look at things, every 7 or 8 years. So the first time they looked at the first body, there was all this fraud that came to light, all this negligence, and they said, this is terrible, we're going to do something else. They created another regulator called the ICCRC. Then they looked at it again, and again, all this fraud, all this negligence, all these victims. They said, oh, that's terrible. We just need more power. We need to be able to go after the ghost consultants, or we need this power or that power.
Okay.
And then they create a whole new regulator called the college. And now it's like, we're going to come up on 7 years, 8 years, and they're going to say the same thing is going to happen. Look at all the damage that was caused. They took away the 50 points.
Who's the current regulator?
Well, that's the college.
Okay.
So so they're going to look at that eventually, and then there's going to be all kinds of testimony, and brave people are going to have to go and testify as to what, how they're victims in various ways. And then the government will have to figure out what they want to do. They want to give them a fourth chance, or they want to finally just say enough is enough. In fact, Jason Kenney's a key advisor to Jason Kenney, who was Minister of Immigration for a long time under the Harper administration, That person just came out recently in a Globe Mail article saying this is enough. Enough's enough. They shouldn't be able to practice law.
Yeah.
I mean, you think it's obvious. You can't practice medicine unless you're a doctor. So doctors go to medical school.
Yeah.
So if you're practicing law, right, then you have to be aware of the Constitution. You have to be aware of different areas of law, criminal, corporate, family. You take that in law school, right? You have to administrative law, obviously. You have to read federal court case law. You have to know what the ratio of a case is. You have to understand how to get to that. You have to look at Immigration Refugee Board cases. You have to follow all the changes. I mean, this is complicated stuff. And, that's practicing law.
Yeah.
Right? And so if you're not learning that, if you're learning in an online course, it's not the same.
Not the same.
It's not the same at all. So yeah, they'll probably look at the college again and hear all this, what's the report card in the last 7 years? Look at all the fraud.
Yeah.
Look at all the stuff that's happened. Look at all the victims. So it's the same thing going over and over and over again. We're just reliving the same thing. Australia has the same experience. UK has the same experience. So when are we going to learn? When are we going to finally find the fortitude to say, no, these people deserve a lawyer? Just because you're marginalized, just because you're not a mainstream white Canadian, you deserve a lawyer. Even if you're marginalized, in the same way that a mainstream Canadian deserves a corporate lawyer, deserves a criminal lawyer, deserves a family lawyer. This segment of the population deserves a proper lawyer.
Okay. So if someone buys a fake LMIA, right, but they work diligently, they pay their taxes, do everything right, should they still be deported?
Well, this is the thing. So it's buyer beware, right? So if you have used an immigration consultant who's unscrupulous and you've gone along with the scheme, the government's going to have absolutely no sympathy for you whatsoever. The NDP at one point said, look, we think that if you're a victim and you didn't know about it, then you should have some kind of remedy. You should be able to stay, etc.
Okay.
The government's rejected that, and the federal court case law rejects it as well. Okay. Because they basically say if you hired this person, it's your responsibility. Because it's very difficult for the government to figure out when you've been complicit and when you've been a victim and not complicit.
Okay.
Right? That disentangling that is very tough for the government. Right? Because some people are complicit and they say, oh yeah, I want to, I'll pay the $60,000. It's fake. I know everything's fake payroll, everything's fake. And they're happy to get PR that way. Whereas other people, they expect to be coming from abroad. They expect to be doing the real job that they think that they're getting arranged for them. And they come and realize there's no job. It could be Filipinos from, coming in to work as a caregiver, and then all of a sudden there's no job. It could be Indians coming in to do some other, some job in terms of LMIA base, and they realize there's no job. So, yeah, I think the government has a hard time teasing out when you're complicit, when you're not. So, the status quo is that if you use a consultant and they do something fraudulent, then you're the one who suffers.
Okay. So, do the consultants, or can they disguise this as a fee as compared to?
Oh, I see. Yeah, there is a consultant that tried to run different companies. So one company was like a recruiting branch and the other was providing the legal services. Okay. And that consultant tried to say that, they weren't charging the foreign workers a recruiting fee. They were just part of the legal fee. And I think it was found to be the case that, that wasn't believed. So that was seen to be suspicious, and at the end of the day, they weren't happy with it because you're not allowed to charge someone to find a job for you.
Okay.
For them, it's illegal. So yeah, some people have tried to run those kinds of things. We've never gotten in the business of that.
Okay, perfect, interesting. So, what steps can the immigrants take to verify that the LMIA is legitimate or it's a legitimate offer?
Well, I mean, I think they need to speak to the employer directly, right? Make sure there's no funny business, there's no kickback, it's a legitimate job offer. Maybe ask, what they've done to try to find Canadians and permanent residents, and then if they're satisfied that it's legitimate, then they can, the employer proceeds with it. The employer shouldn't be charging them anything. No one should be charging them anything. The employer gets the LMIA, pays the fee, and then gives that LMIA to the future employee, and then that person applies for the work visa. But again, like sometimes I've seen a lot of consultants, frankly, are not so clever because they'll get the LMIA tailored to a particular person, but forget to get the CV of the person. So, so all of a sudden the LMIA has all these requirements that the person doesn't even meet. Then they're off applying for a work visa and it gets refused because the officer says, well, LMIA said you need this level of education and work experience. You don't have it. So obviously I have to refuse you.
Could there be a nexus between the employers and the consultants?
Well, I mean, there are. I mean, this is happening, in terms of the consultants approaching employers and saying, not only whatever, I mean, we'll pay you back the taxes and you set up the fake payroll and we'll give you a little money to set this up and run this. And so I mean, that does happen all the time.
Okay. What happens is if LMIA is completely scrapped from Canada?
Well, I mean, that is a possibility. And if that's the case, then a lot of businesses will suffer.
Okay.
Because they won't be able to bring in some key workers.
Like what you initially discussed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Understand. Okay. So I'll give you a few examples. All right. And you let me know, what you think about that, right?
Sure.
So a CBC investigation revealed that a restaurant in Oakville allegedly required a foreign worker to deposit $3,000 in cash monthly, then returned the money as direct deposit, creating fake payroll records to maintain immigration status. The worker was threatened with removal from payroll if they couldn't pay. So the question is, what legal consequence could an employer and a consultant face in such situation?
Well, the consultants should face serious. I mean, they should be disbarred. They should be the equivalent of disbarring. They should lose their license, right? In terms of the employer, they can go on a blacklist. So it's a public list of employers that have been sanctioned, and they can experience monetary penalties.
And they could never apply for LMIA.
Well, there's that too, yeah, and they can be prevented from applying in the future.
Is there currently any such?
Oh, there's lots of people on that list. Yeah.
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 Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
We are also proud to be sponsored by Kapoor Vastralaya, with locations in Mississauga, Ontario, Surrey, British Columbia, and Fremont, California. For the finest selection of ethnic Indian clothing, visit your nearest store and explore their beautiful collection. And just for our subscribers, you can get a one-time discount coupon by visiting thekapoorpodcast.com and filling out the form. Another example, licensed immigration consultant discovered her firm's name had been used without consent on fake LMIA applications for employers in BC, a tactic likely mirrored in Ontario given similarities in fraud ecosystem. Question is, how common is it for scammers to misuse legitimate consultants' name in LMIA fraud?
I mean, I suppose it can happen, but it could also be the case that, someone is alleging that. Like I said before, the government has a hard time figuring out when people are complicit and when they're not. So, I mean, they'd have to provide whatever evidence they can that they weren't complicit. If they're investigated and someone admits that they use, a legitimate in the sense that they're licensed, right? So immigration consultant's business, and that person admits it, then I suppose there should obviously be no sanction against the business. But yeah, I mean, I think sometimes people will say that it wasn't me kind of thing, right? And then, but there are other indicators suggesting that they have engaged in that fraud. So I'm very suspicious about immigration consultants generally. Sure, it's possible that a ghost consultant uses a legitimate sort of immigration consultant business.
Yeah,
I guess that is possible. But I haven't seen too much of that.
How about using actual lawyers?
Oh yeah, that happens. My whole website was copied.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, a very sophisticated copy of my entire website, and I had to contact, multiple, like the people hosting their domain. I host, the web, the site hosting people.
How did you come to know?
Well, I came to know because someone brought it to my attention, and they said I sent this person thousands of dollars, and because I think they weren't so clever. they copied everything, literally everything, and they replaced my image with somebody else. But then they had articles that they reference, and the articles, they didn't go through every article and change the name. So the person was reading an article, saw my name, realized it had been fake and copied, and so then they reached out to me, and then I was able to get the website removed and taken down.
But it took you a lot of time.
It took me some time.
Yeah.
Excuse me, but also, it was impressive the effort that this person had gone through.
But
to
you couldn't
copy
figure out who it was.
No, I couldn't figure out who it was. And they used politicians, images.
Yeah.
And I contacted the politicians, city councillors in BC, and and a leader of the not a leader, but a member of federal parliament. So I contacted all these people and said, this is what's been happening.
What did they say?
Well, they just said, well, we'll just refer it to, the government, whatever internal stuff. But I never heard from them again. But I'm the one who got the site taken down. Yeah.
What time? Like, how long was this?
Oh, I had it taken down within about a few weeks, 2 weeks.
But
it had been running for about 6 months.
Yeah.
And there had been multiple victims.
And this was like recent, or?
This is about, I don't know, maybe like 8 months ago or something like that. Yeah.
Recent. All right, one more example. Transport industry groups in Ontario report that some individuals pay between $50,000 and $60,000 to obtain LMIA-based job offers, even though actual job needs, like the number of trucks versus drivers, seem disproportionate. Question is, why do trucking and possibly other sectors become hotbeds for LMIA scams?
Well, I suppose, it's just people who are desperate to be able to stay in Canada at this point, because you don't get points for the LMIA anymore. So I think it'd be just people who are trying to buy time. They might, some people counsel them to make fake refugee claims. Some people say, we'll just do, we'll do a fake LMIA. But I think, you'd have to be pretty desperate to pay that kind of money just to be able to get a work permit extension, because you're not getting PR out of it.
Yeah.
But so hopefully the fraud's gone down a bit. But again, I think it was too much of a blunt tool, too much of a hammer approach to get rid of all LMIA points for everybody, because there's so many legitimate people that are suffering now.
So the trucking industry is also one of them, one of the industries that requests LMIA?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Why, they can't find drivers in Canada?
That's the argument, yeah.
Interesting.
No, but there is a known shortage, actually. In construction and trucking, there is a known shortage of Canadians, yes, for those roles. Yes.
Okay. So now, what has prompted you to speak on this issue?
Well, so, you see it year after year after year. You have people crying in your office. You have victims that said, I went to what I thought was a lawyer. How could the government of Canada allow these people to practice? And they're literally in tears, and you just feel awful for them. And, that happens once or twice, it's one thing. But to have it happen hundreds of times, after a while, it gets to you.
Yeah.
And so I started to speak out, and I started to write on the immigration lister, which is, for immigration lawyers. And I started to complain about that and say, I saw this, I saw that. Finally, someone suggested I volunteer and for the Canadian Bar Association. So I did that. That led to higher roles. And then I ultimately became the national chair of that organization. And I led a resolution saying that, across the whole of the CBA, across all areas of law, it's a resolution that's binding on the whole of the Canadian Bar Association. And it basically said that we no longer think that it's a good thing to have immigration consultants practicing law. And so I banned them from our conference, so they couldn't attend the conference because they were sometimes asking embarrassing questions of politicians and high-level speakers there. And I didn't think it's a good idea for them to learn just enough to game the system. Now, I disagree with some of my colleagues will disagree with me on that, and some of them get a lot of referrals from consultants, right, in terms of litigation and other things. Yeah. And I've noticed that. Okay. I don't want to speak ill of my colleagues. Some of them may have a genuine disagreement with me and feel like it's better to have some education than no education in terms of, at a high level. So whatever. I mean, I then, decided to found the Canadian Immigration Lawyers Association with some colleagues, and that's because I didn't feel like the Canadian Bar Association was strong enough in terms of its response, and it just structurally wasn't strong enough to be able to hire lobbyists, to be able to and retain funds and really be more direct in trying to advocate for these vulnerable victims. And so that organization does have the ability to retain its own funds. We don't have to go begging to people within the Canadian Bar Association writ large. It's the immigration section of the Canadian Bar Association didn't ultimately control the money that they raised, and we raised a lot of money with our conferences, et cetera. So at the Canadian Immigration Law Association, we can retain our own funds. We can disperse the money as we see fit. We're having our first conference. I'm no longer as part of the executive of that organization. I'm allowing others to sort of step in and lead, because that's our tradition. Unlike the body for the advocacy group for immigration consultants called CAPIC, I've noticed that they don't have the same turnover that we think is important for just a volunteer organization and democratic organization, et cetera. So anyway, so they are. So CELA is having its first conference. Hopefully that'll raise some money. Then we have a bit of a war chest, and we can start to take on some of these issues more and more, if that's the direction that the future executives want to go. But it's really just been about, I've been very animated about this issue because of the victims. And it's led me to volunteer an enormous amount of time. Not because I want immigration consultants to lose their livelihoods. I don't. But I want them to partner with immigration lawyers who ultimately have to sign off.
Okay.
They can still make a lot of money. They can still, bring in a lot of clients. They can have all kinds of business relationships.
Yeah.
No one's saying they have to, make $30,000 or $40,000 a year as a clerk. I'm not saying that. But I'm most concerned about just public protection. I just want the public to not have to be so victimized as we're seeing on a daily basis.
Okay. Which other ways do you think you can help out in the future?
Well, I mean, right now I've moved into a different role. So I'm a co-chair with a Department of Justice lawyer for one of the main immigration, continuing professional development days put on by the Law Society of Ontario, our regulator. So we're helping to organize topics and speakers, justices, Department of Justice lawyers, private bar lawyers. So I've moved into that, and I'm enjoying that. And we're talking about the law and talking about all the changes and what it means. And I'm helping to sort of educate my colleagues as lawyers to be the best they can be, so that hopefully the public chooses to select a lawyer to help them with their immigration matters. Okay. So that's sort of where I'm going. But I'll continue to tell the honest truth whenever I'm invited to do so, like I am today, so that people understand what the real issues are in terms of this problem.
Perfect. Now, what do you think is the solution to this problem?
Well, I do think that it's time to say enough is enough and not have this college regulate consultants. I think that really it should be a matter of the Law Society regulating lawyers, and consultants need to partner with lawyers now. I think it's just, we've had decades of this, and I think enough's enough. So that's the big solution. I think that if that happens, we'll be able to bring back a lot of the programs that we've lost. The owner-operator LMIA, the LMIA points you get. As some examples, the Ontario Entrepreneur Program, for instance. So there's $1 trillion worth of businesses that need to change hands. Because immigrants came in, many of them, they started convenience stores or what have you. The kids became lawyers and doctors. We have a lot of businesses that we need entrepreneurial immigrants for, and there's no real program to bring them in. Even the startup visa is a sort of a federal program that's about innovative business ideas, and it's always been a small numbers program, and the delays in that program are multi-year at this point. So that's not a real viable program to bring in entrepreneurs. Ontario just killed their Ontario Entrepreneur Program, I think related to a lot of fraud. So I think that if we get the fraud out, all of a sudden we'll be able to have programs that are really beneficial for Canada and for Canadians, as we have an aging population. In fact, I can't even say aging, it's an aged
Yeah.
population. It's no longer aging, it's aged. So all labor force growth comes from immigration. So we need immigrants. And, the number of temporary residents have gone from 300,000 10 years ago to 3 million today. Just think about that. 300,000 10 years ago to 3 million today.
Yeah.
Temporary residents are people on work permits, study permits, and visitors.
Right.
That is what the government is responding to when they slashed the number of permanent residents that we're going to bring in from 500,000, which was the target, to 395,000. So they reduced that by 21%, but they want to reduce the temporary residents from 7% of the population to 5% of the population. So it's the wrong target. It's like after 9/11 going after Iraq.
Right.
Like, why are you affecting the level of permanent residents? That should be high because we need to transition people because they're not going to go.
Right.
They're going to get poor advice. They're going to make fake refugee claims, which is what we're seeing.
Yeah.
They're not going anywhere.
Right.
So why reduce the room by 21% of permanent residents? Keep the room high, make them permanent residents. They'll pay tax. They'll be able to move to different jobs, find better employment. All those concerns about exploitation will dissipate. Keep the numbers high just for the next few years at least to sort of deal with the huge numbers of temporary residents whose permits are expiring. Because again, people say, "Oh, don't worry, they're expiring, they're going to leave." They're not going to leave, a lot of them. Some will go, but some need to transition to permanent residence. So I think that's what we've got to do. We've got to bring back faith in the system, a fair system. I think Canadians are upset with the fraud that they're seeing, perhaps more so than they're concerned about the sheer numbers of temporary residents. I think if they thought it was a fair system and people weren't gaming the system and there weren't bad actors out there, I think the Canadian public would feel differently about it. But I think this is the root of the problem, and I think it's time the government finally addressed the root of the problem.
Perfect. This has been amazing. Any last piece of advice that you want to give to our listeners?
Well, do the work. I mean, when I'm hiring an accountant, when I'm getting financial advice, I have to learn what's a CPA, what's this, there's different designations when you're getting financial advice. There's, I'm sure it's the same to a certain extent in many areas. If you want to, you need a second opinion for a doctor, you might want to look up the doctor a bit.
Yeah.
It's not easy to do that. It's hard, but learn the difference between someone who is not licensed, someone who's a registered immigration consultant and what their requirements are for that position, and a lawyer. Find out, do your due diligence. It's no fun to quote someone a very expensive appeal fee because they didn't hire a lawyer in the first place. If you hire a lawyer and at least go to a consultation, a paid consultation, in my case, we have paid consultations. And I think it's worth it because you spend a few $100s, you get me, and I've got 25 years of experience, and I'm telling you, what I'm giving you strategic advice from the outset, right? So that you don't make the kind of mistakes that I see people make when they go to, when they get underrepresentation, I'll call it, from people who are not very good. So at least get ethical, honest advice, and there may be a pathway that makes sense that doesn't involve fraud.
Yeah.
So see the lawyer for the first consultation for sure, and really think about whether you're actually saving money. Assuming you are, but again, I often find that a lot of the immigration consultants are charging exorbitant fees. And I often find there's lots of junior lawyers out there who work in firms. You can sometimes say, listen, this is my budget, and sometimes a lawyer will, will have a sliding scale for you. So there's lots of ways that you can try to make it affordable. Just remember, if you don't hire a lawyer, and then you're coming to a lawyer later because someone's messed up your case, it will inevitably be pretty expensive if you're dealing with an appeal. Like a lawyer's time to go to the federal court is not nothing, right? So I find it very sad when that happens, So just do a bit of work to figure out what the qualifications and credentials are. And, again, a lawyer, 4 years undergraduate typically, 3 years of law school, bar admissions course, articling internship year. I mean, it's 8.5 plus years.
For sure.
It's different.
Perfect. This has been amazing, Ravi. Thanks for doing this once again. And, there are many different topics about immigration. We might explore some of the topics some other time.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. This episode of the Kapoor podcast was proudly sponsored by Kapoor Law Firm and Kapoor Australia. If you are enjoying the show and want a one-time discount code, head over to our website, thekapoorpodcast.com, and fill out the form to receive your subscriber-only discount code. Whether you're looking for legal expertise or premium Indian ethnic wear, our sponsors have you covered. One more request to all of you, please do subscribe to the show and leave a comment to let us know what you think and how we can improve. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching and see you in the next episode.